An oomph, and this is it. Hey, Chris.
Morning, everyone.
Hi. Do you know everyone on the call?
Yes, Jesse, I think you and I met.
We did, and I'm
Yeah,
actually
we did have some conversations about executive functions. Not, I think was it a few years ago? Hey, this Miss Ferguson.
we're having an internet outage in our board right now, um, which feels like not a good thing.
Yeah.
So I'm hanging out with the lovely Joe Ferguson at her house using her Wi-Fi.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
perfect. Is
nice.
Jasper going to join us, Miss Ferguson?
I'm gonna take Jasper away so that because he loves Jesse a whole lot and he would love nothing more than be on camera the entire time. So I'm gonna pull him away.
Okay.
Jasper is Joe's golden retriever.
I was going to
Yeah.
ask. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a polite way to ask, is Jasper a dog or a
Dog or
Yeah.
kid.
Is-
Mhm.
So I'd love to start the call just with everybody going around saying maybe just a few sentences like who you are, what your background is relative to this question.
Happy to jump in.
Thanks, Alana.
So Alana McGilly, and currently I am a special assignment teacher with the Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic District School Board, and just really briefly met Laurie in 2015. Executive functions really impacted our work at Saganascat and then brought it into our Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic District School Board, both as a classroom teacher and then as a student success and resource teacher. Realizing its impact, I moved to system, was an itinerant special education resource teacher, so basically a teacher collaborator, an amazing role to do this work with teachers throughout the whole board. Brought it to a book club, and then finally this year as a special assignment teacher, we have some grant money and we have it's sitting in our MYSP goal, so we're allowed to bring it to the system this year, so really excited.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, I could go next.
Thanks,
Um,
Jess.
I'm Jessie Lalonde. I am a special education coordinator for Limestone District School Board. And I spent the first 18 years of my teaching career teaching students with intellectual disabilities and autism. And then when I came to the board to Ed Services, I supported our learning disability support programs, had a big role in assistive technology. And now I get to do lots of PD with our intensive support teachers and our student support teachers. And I think executive functions have always been a passion of mine before I even really knew that that's what they were called. Because I can think back to so many situations in my own classroom where I had that aha moment that it wasn't actually the math that was the barrier. It wasn't actually the reading that was the barrier. It was all the things around it. It was remembering what you were supposed to do, being able to access those instructions again, knowing what you were supposed to do with it. And so I saw Laurie speak at the CEC conference a bunch of years ago. And it was this like moment where I was like, yes, this is the thing. This is what we've been talking about. And ever since then, I just have been trying to weave it into everything I do. And so this year with those special education teacher meetings, we spend half an hour at each meeting on EFs. And it's part of every classroom consultation I do. And I think it's so, so valuable.
Thanks, Jesse.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Keene, and I work in Hastings District School Board. My current role is I'm a learning support coordinator, which I think is similar to your role, Jesse, in the avenue that I support special education needs for a specific school group in our board. Prior to that, I was an assistive technology learning coach, and that's where our paths crossed prior. And then before that, I spent some time at SAG as well, and my background is teaching intermediate and high school students with an angle towards special education. And I was in the classroom for around 20 years, and then I've been taking on these roles and supporting supporting our students that way. And when I left Saginaw and went back to HPEDSB, one of the things that I brought with me was executive function learning. And I made it kind of a goal of mine to bring it system wide. And I've been kind of plugging away at it for 4 years. And I think we're at a point where it feels pretty good where we are with it, but there's always work to be done. So yeah, that's my background and where I am right now.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone. So the point of today is really to offer advice to an educator who's trying to figure out how to overcome some big barriers and to mobilizing an awareness of executive functions and maybe a focus on helping teachers to build skill around supporting self-regulated learning in classrooms, having open conversations about how executive functions might be used, about what the barriers to learning might be, to kind of move more of that work that often only happens in tier 2 settings right into the mainstream classroom. And how do we support all teachers to do more of this work in the mainstream, and what do they need? And so I'm just casting my eyes over the list of obstacles, that Lynn shared, and I'm seeing things like resistance to change, teachers feeling comfortable with their current methods, a sense of time constraints, teachers having busy schedules and adding professional development feeling overwhelming, a lack of relevance or buy-in. So if teachers don't immediately understand the importance of executive function skills, they may be reluctant and skeptical, wondering if it's better than their current practice. Insufficient support and resources. So feeling as though good PD is going to take more than just one shot, and sort of do they trust that we are going to support them in an ongoing way, some of their past experiences. So a sense that there's always something else to work on, and feeling like past PDs weren't followed up on and were a waste of time. A fear of increased workload. So similar to the time constraint issue, that there's worry about adding on to an already heavy workload, the one more thing phenomenon. And then also school culture and leadership. So, what does it mean to get principals on board? What does it mean to make this part of some of the systems that are used to make the school run? How can it be incorporated into some of the collaborative spaces? And so teachers may be feeling resistant or apathetic, that it just won't be something that all of their colleagues will jump on board with. So my first question to you is, if there was one more, even more nuanced obstacle that you've identified in your work, what would it be? I wonder if anybody wants to start.
If you don't, I'll jump in first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that depends on where you are in the journey, because that changes. I think that's a moving target, and where we are right now, I think for us, I think there's a level of coaching that's required, and that coaching can come in the form of, like, it could come from, coaching within a school-based team already. That was a really great opportunity for me for learning when I was learning about executive functions at Saginaw, was being able to just go next door to my teaching partner's classroom and to see some of it in action, be like, oh, that's what it sounds like. Oh, that's what it looks like, and take small pieces back to my classroom. But I could do that on a regular basis, right? I wasn't on my own trying to figure it out and trying to walk through it. So I think that piece is important, because there's a level of support within your school when you have that, someone to talk to, someone to observe, someone to bounce ideas off of. And depending on how widespread the use of this is, will determine whether you have access to that in your building.
So teachers feeling a little isolated in their practice.
Yeah, like when I first, if there was someone listening to this and they were thinking like, I want to bring executive functions to my board, I can tell you all the mistakes I made. I can tell you all the paths and the roads that I went down that like I was like, this isn't working. This is not going to do it. And for me, it was I started out in my role. I was going to schools and I was talking with principals one at a time, and then I was talking to teachers one at a time. And it felt like I was trying to drain the ocean one bucket at a time because I was trying to convince one person at a time. And along that chain of communication, if there was one person who disagreed with what I was saying, the whole thing fell apart for that school. And that went on for a year where that's how we were approaching it. And at the end of that year, I was like, this is not moving anywhere. I need to change my approach.
And Chris, I echo so many things that you're commenting, especially that idea of doing one at a time, right? Like I remember when Jesse, I had a similar experience to you when I met Laurie. It was 2015 at the LDO. I was with Andrew Brown, new teacher at Saganaska, and I'm like, this is it. Like, you know, when you hear someone, Jesse, and you're like, this is what I have my students desperately need for increase, not just like student achievement, but mental health and well-being. Yeah. And that's when I first met Laurie. And then Chris, we did the one at a time, you know, practice, because I think it's important all of us also come to this listening to your backgrounds from that special education lens, which not all teachers at that very beginning, depending where they are in their journey, are able to reframe. So like I know in our grant project that we're doing this year, that was one of the survey questions, and it was really identified that if you know what executive functions are, then you're better able to see that challenge in your student and know what to do about it. And if you don't have any clue about what executive functions are, you're not reframing that behavior. You're thinking that what you're seeing, you know, they're lazy, they're this, they're that, and not, you know, we're really missing an opportunity to reframe and support with executive functions, which is why that idea of taking it to system with the coaching is particularly so important. And just the final thing I would add is what the next nuance, Laurie, would be like, I love your book. We were doing this work, became an activated trainer for level 3 before the book came out. And what I love about this book is that there's so many different ways to implement it. You give so many choices, because what I found the obstacle, someone who had drunk the tea, if you will, and they're doing all the stuff, can be a little intimidating. Like you go into that classroom, you see all the posters, and it's like, I have to be like that in order to do EF work, which is why, and we'll talk more about it later, when we're writing the grant and working with Laurie, we specifically decided to focus on like the power protocol, just the barrier strategy, something simple that everybody can do, and just like baby step into it.
And Alana, if I could circle back, you said taking it to the system is so important. Can you circle back on that point and just summarize why?
Well, like all of this, we know and see that working with and supporting students with executive functions is life-saving, not life-changing. This changes lives with our children. And I know for a fact from the students I've taught that are now so successful, you know, 7, 8, 10 years later. Yeah. For the people doing the work, you need to have that system level support of not just administrators, but the support I've received in our board from my own superintendent, curriculum coordinator. They are a big reason why that this work is able to spread in a way that is meaningful. We did the voluntary book club for 2 years, Laurie. Monday night, 150 educators showing up at 4 o'clock on their own time. What? Cool. That was crazy. Yeah. But the feedback was that if we are to feel valued and inspired and successful, give us the time during the day. And that's what our board did. They put it as an MYSP goal, which as a teacher, I never realized how important those goals were, those system goals. Yeah. The fundings, we have funding for it through the grant, and we're able now to give teachers time during the day to connect. And Chris, do that coaching. I so agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
What allowed you to get the grant, Alana? Because everybody would love to have more resources. What do you think was your trick?
Well, removing barrier grant, that's the grant that all boards can put a request in, a funding request. So I would highly suggest you to look at that. And with that grant, it needs to be something that you're not bringing people on, you're not hiring people. It's something that's going to
Yeah.
affect change, centering needs-based planning on students with special education needs, right? And Laurie, you said it at the very beginning, and I so agree with you that we have to move to a tier one. It's about that focused in that tier one, necessary for some, good for all. And so I was just really honest and showed the progression of all the things, Chris, like we've done from individual to small groups to like this next level. If we could have this funding to support time for release of teachers, it's going to affect them and reframing the needs of what they see in their class, but student success ultimately helping our kids.
Great. Okay, thanks. And it'll be interesting to hear what you did with your grant funds, and we'll make time to talk about that in just a minute. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just going to say, like, Alana, it seems like your journey with this at your school board is very similar to the one that we went through, in the sense that that first year wasn't going the way I wanted it to, and I had to change tact, and I brought it back to central level, and I started to run book clubs for central teams. Started with my own team and built awareness there. Started to get more involvement and understanding of what executive functions were at a central level. And I think that was important because what that did was, instead of having one voice going to schools one at a time, I was able to create, with the support of everyone centrally, 80 voices going out and having these conversations with schools about the importance of it, and then building from there. And then it started to become part of professional development days, where we were presenting to admin teams, we were presenting to LST teams, we were going into schools and having conversations about it, curriculum services. And it was getting the word out kind of like that way at first, which really lit a fire under it. But then we hit a point, same as what you were saying, is we needed funding for this to get it into the schools now. And that funding, we had a pocket, an envelope of money for UDL training, and executive functions fits under that umbrella of UDL. And we were able to supply the schools that were interested with funding for the purchase of books and development and some release time, depending on what direction they wanted to go. And we had Laurie come in. That was how we got some of the funding, to have Laurie come in and provide some PD to our schools. So very similar trajectory, or like path, that you followed with your board. And I think that that's interesting, that there's a commonality there about how we were able to bring it forward. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think I would just build on what both of you have said. Like, it is that system importance of it. And so we've really been trying to partner with our curriculum people and not just be the spec ed voice saying executive functions are important, but actually in a math workshop having some talk about EFs, in a literacy workshop talking about, you can be doing all the right things in literacy, but if that student's not moving forward, it could be a challenge in the EF area that's making that happen. And so we have to have this awareness, because I think when people see it coming from just one piece of the board, they're like, oh yeah, okay. But when we are all speaking the same language, so I love that you did that, Chris. And then the other thing I would say is, to do that learning is important, but the other piece that I find is important is the ability to check back in, right? So like you said, when you went, when you went into other people's classrooms and were able to see, you could do that on an ongoing basis. And so I find it's when I can go back to someone's school, or I can go back to a team of people I've been working with, and we can talk about, okay, so you tried some things. How did that go? Oh, that one didn't go very well. Let's talk about what you could do next time. What did go really well? That ability to check in, I think, is part that we forget sometimes in PD, that it can't just be a one and done sort of thing. And so what we've had funds for this year is, because our spec ed model shifted considerably this year, is this PD with our in-school spec ed people. And so at every meeting, we've been equipping them with short activities, with short snippets of information to take back to their staff. in really bite-sized, manageable chunks to start those conversations. Because when the book came out, like I didn't even have a chance to organize a book club. People were like, "We're going to do book clubs at our school." Okay, great. That's awesome. And so then people are like, okay, so now I've read the book, we've had the book club, now what? Right? And so our focus this year has really been around implementing the things in the classroom and really focusing on like, we try and do a barrier strategies at each of our PD sessions. And and really also I would say because Lori's original question was like, what other barrier was not on that list? The other thing that we identified is that awareness of your own executive functions, right? And we have to have that self-awareness if we're going to have an awareness of our students. And so if I'm going to be able to reframe a student's behavior, that they were not being defined in that moment, that working memory was just not coming into play, and so they weren't remembering the request that was made of them. I have to be able to reflect on my own skills and strategies. And so I've said to so many groups this year, I've said to them, I learned an emotional lesson in grade 8 that I do not have the innate ability to cut my own bangs. It was emotional. There was some externalized behavior. There was lots of language. There was avoidance of situations, right? But now I pay someone to cut my hair, and that's okay. Um, and so we have to have that, we have to have the ability to laugh about ourselves and
Yeah.
say, I don't get 15 out of 15 on the EF survey. And if I did, I would need to be a little more reflective and honest. We all have things we need support with. And when we can accept that about ourselves, we are better able to accept that about our students.
That
Um,
is that, that's something I don't know enough, deeply enough yet. It's something that I've been talking about since day one, that we need to know it in ourselves in order to support other people and believe it.
yeah.
But I think there's more to learn actually about just psychologically and emotionally how deeply ingrained your philosophy is about learning, your philosophy about error, how I'm sure like should talk to my clinical colleagues about like generational trauma, and how much it contaminates your ability to learn new things, how much your own experiences. So that's something, thanks for highlighting that, Jesse. That's something that I need to go much deeper into. Anything else as a nuanced barrier? I mean, I've been working on barriers at the classroom level around teachers being able to manage like these group spaces. Oh, there's like a gesture that's just automatically been created. Teachers need to manage the emotions that come up when they put children in vulnerable spaces together. So this work around emotion validation has been really big and important. That teachers need to explicitly talk to the class about the changes in the power structure, that actually children need to know that we're not mad at them when we're asking them these questions, that we are eager to hear their ideas, that we're sharing agency. We need to actually tell them that.
And Laurie, same with our teachers too.
Yeah.
Really, like everything that you just said and put children, I would put educator in too, right?
So yeah, maybe that's one of the big things to arise from this is we need to do more work with the educators on their feelings and their values, and hearing you, Jesse, say you do a BSP at every gathering, at every staff gathering or meeting. Yeah, it just makes me think there would be room to emphasize those messages more there from top down.
Well, and it does help with that feeling like education is hard these days. It is, teaching is a hard job. And at the very least, I feel like doing a BSP at a staff meeting or a PD event doesn't let it stop with the barriers. Like it's so easy we could sit, it wouldn't matter what the topic was for the PD. We could sit at anyone and we could list all the reasons that this is going to be hard to do.
Yeah.
But at the very minimum, the BSP is making us shift that focus for a little while to what can we do?
Jesse, I agree. It's really that personal leadership of optimism. It really pushes you into choosing joy. Choosing to be solution minded, but in a way that values your frustrations, because I think teachers need to be able, just like students, to say, what is hard and feel valued by having that expression. I know us two have moved to doing that barrier strategy at all of our PDs, and through the grant that we're doing, administrators are now doing it, department heads are doing it, that consistent modeling, 5 to 7 minutes, and it's just such a wonderful, easy tool that everyone can use to move forward, right? I totally agree.
Yeah, and so the other obstacle, there's like emotion validation, there's being explicit about changes in the power structure, and then the last big obstacle that I've been working on is this idea that children need specific goals, and that's our research in your board, Chris, like that idea that we need to come back, which picks up on, Jesse, what you were saying as well, that teachers also need us to come back and do that follow-up on how did we do. And maybe what that means is that everything we're doing with children needs to be reflected with teachers. And that when we do the barriers and strategies, like Alana, yeah, we're really focusing on with strategies, what can we do, right? That like optimism, that can-do attitude. But when we're talking through barriers, there's an opportunity to do some emotion validation with everybody and really take that time to like let emotions be in the room and support everybody's mental health and emotional health. But then maybe we also need to think about with these initiatives, giving everybody a specific goal. Why are we doing this? What are we hoping to achieve with this initiative? What's achievement going to look like? And we're actually going to keep ourselves accountable. We're going to come back in this specific amount of time. We've actually estimated. We think this is how long it's going to take to make this change. And this is exactly what we're looking for. And if we don't find it, then we go into another cycle of problem solving where we figure out what the barriers were again and we strategize again. But we don't really do that in PD. We don't really say this cycle of PD ends on June 30th next year, and this is what we expect to achieve. It might teach us that this doesn't work. It might teach us that it does. It might help us direct resources if it's a more accountable process.
If I can jump in on that point, Laurie, and I know all the boards in Ontario are working on the Math Achievement Action Plan, and our board took advantage, which I don't know if all boards realize there is that MIP funding that is there, focusing on students with special education needs, decreasing gap, especially going towards the D-stream classrooms. What can we do in junior age students to help? And that's where our board leveraged the funds from that pilot that we did, that now all boards get that funding to support our math project. But in that math project, it's a total collaboration between math, curriculum, and student services, special education, with a focus on instructional leadership of our CERTs. So Laurie, our first workshop with CERTs, we did that barrier strategy. What is the barrier to support the students who need us the most, that needs-based planning? But that first barrier strategy that we did now 2 years ago has actually paved the way for all of our PD that we have done in our board for the last 2 years with CERTs. And we've looked at those strategies, and it has focused in very targeted ways where we're using and allocating our resources in the board and our focus topics on special education resource days. And so we keep coming back to that initial barrier strategy to say, okay, now what? That point has helped as if anyone's listening, that global framework, it's been really successful. Because I agree, Jesse, it can't be a one and done. You need to come back. And if you rush through those barriers, and teachers and CERTs and educators, even SOs, don't feel heard initially, like then you don't get the buy-in for the strategy development. That emotional validation is key.
And and I went to Laurie, I went to one of your chapter 1 to 3 online sessions this time last year, I think. And you did a BSP. And what I loved about how you did it is that we kind of identified, I think your topic was writing. And so we identified our barriers and we identified our strategies. And it was very much the sorts of things that you would expect people to come up with on both sides of the chart. And then there was this moment where you said to people, okay, what like weird and wonderful thing would I never have thought of that would help you with this?
Mm.
And I talk to people about that so much because I say, like, that's the moment where it shifted from I've already decided what I'm willing to do to help you to I'm actually able to step out of my comfort zone and support you in a way that I wouldn't have thought of before, but that you're telling me would help you.
And
And
that,
so,
yeah,
so I was just going to add, and so to add to that, to Alana's point, like to go back to when we're saying students in that situation, now let's shift it to teachers, right? And so when we do at a
yeah,
PD,
yeah.
when we do a BSP, and we say like, what weird and wonderful thing have I not thought of yet? How does that shift the feeling of those professionals to the system supports when we're willing to step out of our comfort zone to help them in a way that maybe we haven't thought of yet?
Yeah, that makes me think of, and this, Alana, is something that I developed with you, was that POWER, that thing, which is in the 3 hour slide deck on the website. It's one of the final pieces, one of the great little ideas that we came up with. But that we need to talk to everybody explicitly about how power is being shared, what types of agency they can expect to have, how their voices will be valued, what's the spirit of the engagement. We need to talk about that explicitly at the beginning, but that there are ways, Jesse, I'm hearing that it gets integrated throughout the process and reinforced throughout the process with the kinds of things that we say. Yeah. Are there any more little nuanced barriers?
The one when I met with my 14 leadership teams, competing interest was the number one thing. It's kind of like time constraints, but what I'm hearing from my educators, we're involved in this literacy, this math, this, and there can be overwhelming. So that was the number one thing. And we moved to trying to, with the leadership team first, before they worked with the school, to really support them to show that, like Jesse, you said earlier, executive functions are not an add-on.
Yeah.
This is what actually, like in your book, Laurie, you want to resist teacher burnout, you want to resist whacking a mole and all the things that you're trying to do, which I know the best intent, but we can do it in such a more targeted way and layered approach if we change the lens on our glasses of, how we see and work and see children.
There were so many times when executive functions were being shared kind of at, different department meetings or staff meetings or whatever they were, and the audience they're close to their saturation point where they've already been hit with a number of pieces of PD, and then somewhere in the middle of that, executive functions was being infused at the same time. And I took that opportunity to say that this is something that helps to bring all of it together. So if we're looking to increase math scores, if we're looking to increase reading scores, if we're looking to increase student engagement, this is how we do this, and this is how we bring it all together. So that part of it, we would talk about the buy-in from schools, like why, what their approach should be, why should they care? And that was kind of the approach that I took. Is I identified 3 areas for discussion. The first one was, in all these presentations over the last few years, it was, what are executive functions? Why should I care? How do I implement? And I tried to keep it short and sweet for each one so that teachers, respecting their time and where they were possibly over the saturation point already, what can I walk away from here and be able to implement? And saying it in a way, like taking some ideas from your book, Laurie, and saying, it doesn't matter what your style of teaching is, this works for you. So if these are the things that are going to help. And I found that approach was helpful, because if I'm trying to put myself in the chairs of the teachers that are sitting in that audience and they're asking the same questions, they're probably, why do I care about this? What am I going to do next? What is this? and try to answer those questions really quickly and keep them with me, and keep them engaged with what I'm doing so that they take from that and they want to do it. And I found that that was probably the best approach in those sessions.
Chris, didn't you find too that it needed to be an authentic
Yeah,
concern for them? So, for example, a big one, we're all doing EQAO, all of us.
yeah,
And it came up, and there was a light at the table with the leadership team I was working on in this one elementary school. And they were like, initiation in a time test setting. Oh my goodness. Why are
yeah,
we not working on it? That's an EF to help that, because that was a real barrier, task initiation, to get started right away for that EQAO time test setting or whatever. Um, Depending, and in other situations that could be a time test or a limited of time. So we need to focus on the EF. So when it was an authentic concern, I find the buy-in for teachers is so much more real. So it's also us as and the leadership teams really listening to teachers
Yeah.
to really like find out what are those key areas of concern or need first that you can tap into to then share strategies.
I agree. I think that's a really good point, Elena. And depending on the audience, having a conversation with them about what's happening in their classrooms right now, what are things that you're needing to work on or that you want to address, and then going through and modeling a BSP for one of those suggestions from the audience, and they see how quickly you can go through it, and that again, fitting it into what they already do. Doesn't matter the style of teach you are or what your approach is. This fits with whatever you do. We can do this. So let's solve this problem together. This is what it would look like if we were in a classroom. This is what it would sound like, and model that for them. And then you get more buy-in with it for sure when they see it in action. I agree.
Chris, one of the barriers that you had was, the buy-in for teachers or, their past experiences. We've done this and it hasn't changed. I had one leadership team, Laurie, go and say to their team, had teachers come in one at a time, and they said, what's your $1 million question? What's happening in your class? What's that $1 million right now? If, you could, if this was alleviated, your students would be able to focus, better achievement, whatever it was. And that's how they approached it, to get that personal connect. And that was in a school that was very reluctant to engage consistently. Like, we did the power protocol once, check mark, done.
Yeah.
The school leadership team wanted more, to see it more than just a check mark. And that's how they did it. What's that one? And that's how they got the buy-in, by cluing into that teacher need and student need.
The buy-in thing is that is a tough hurdle to overcome, because like I look at it like you're probably going to get about 25% of the staff or your system are going to be the go-getters, and they want to jump on this. They see the value in it. Maybe they have a background in special education and they're super keen on it. And those will be the people who jump on early with you, and they're the ones that are going to be involved in reading the book and trying the stuff and reaching out to you. And then you've got this middle of the road group of about 50% who they may try it. They just might need to see a little bit more in action, or maybe they need to lean on someone. And then you have a segment of the population who might be resistant to it for a variety of reasons. And they could be anything from I'm overworked and overloaded, or I'm just at my limit. I don't have time for this. And I found if we can get that 25% engaged and super keen on it, and that 50% starts to come to that first group because they're seeing it in action. And I found that was important in the schools that I was in, is getting that first group that's super excited about it. Because when I leave, teachers start asking and talk, what's that thing that you guys were working on? I thought that was, oh, that's cool. And these conversations happen when I'm not there anymore. If I can engage that first group and they're all over it, that second group, the larger group, the 50% piece in the middle, they're going to start asking questions. And that's where we start to see school change. That's where we start to see system change. And that last group, though, if you've got an answer for that, I'd love to know.
I maybe do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's like a fourth big obstacle. I recently gave an online training where people from all over the world came, and there was this really sparky person from the UK who came. She was the head of a Jewish school, And she was sort of sitting back the whole time, and you could tell that she was in that 25%. She was like very critical, and she shared something that I think is really validating for people in that 25%. I think there's a really justified concern that work around EFs constitutes over scaffolding of students, that there's too much emphasis on scaffolding, and that even if people don't know the science around how EFs are built, they actually have a very accurate worry that that won't work, and they're right. And this is something that Adele Diamond has steered us towards recently too, that work on EFs, scaffolding is one part of the work. But actually, the way you build an executive function is by providing a good challenge to it, like giving it a workout. And so teachers who become, we know teachers, they learn something and then they become incredibly proficient at doing it. And so some of our teachers who are really great EF teachers might not be building executive functions because they are like quick draw with a scaffold for every situation, and there remains no challenge to the core EFs and no ability for children to get better. So I think that that is actually another big thing that needs to be highlighted. And there's sort of a little tool around that I'm starting to develop, which is this idea of an NSP, a nurturing, scaffolded opportunity to practice. That the way you build executive functions is by providing opportunities for them to be practiced, and these opportunities need to be genuinely challenging, and that the only way children will rise to those challenges and do those things that are a little bit uncomfortable and hard is in a nurturing environment where they feel encouraged, where they feel the adult or the community believes in them, their possibility and their potential, where they feel safe, feel like they belong and cared about, where they don't feel lonely or unduly anxious, and where it's scaffolded the right amount, where it's like we haven't thrown them into the deep end of the pool and left them there for an hour, where we retain challenge, yes, but we do some cognitive offloading so that they're not way over scaffolded. And I've been talking about it a little bit like, Chris, and this comes back to Chris, to one of the nuances that you shared with me once, which is like the teachers are it's a hard sell because they do everything, they give it a go, and then the kids are just kind of like clinging to the edge of the pool and not really doing anything different. They're not really looking like, they're not using the strategies. So what does that mean? And I think we've gotten at that a little bit with like tangible feedback and whether you met the expectation or not. But I also think children after COVID are way less capable than we expect. And it's really hard to believe it. It comes back to your initial point, Alana, I think, around like all of our biases and assumptions when we look at a child, that it's not EFs. I think it's just exacerbated now. We're looking at a child in a grade 2, 3, 4, 5 classroom. We've spent the last 5 years teaching grade 5. It's like, I know darn well what the majority of you are capable of doing and you're not doing it. But they've missed so much development. Those years when they were home, all the bells ringing, the lineups, the waiting your turn, the working in groups, they just missed the development. So they are clinging to the side of the pool a lot of the time because I think we're pitching our challenges too hard, actually, like sometimes way too hard. But that I felt that was such good feedback from that educator. That there a lot of teachers in their gut, they worry that this is over scaffolding, and they couldn't tell us all the science around how to build an EF, but they're right, which is often true of an experienced educator. They can't explain it, but nah.
They know.
They know. Yeah.
I was just going to share to concur from the data from our pre-survey for our 14 leadership teams. Laurie, the one question was about all the executive functions listed, and it's like, in what area do you see the challenges? And I expected, and I'm sure Jesse and Chris, when you're in classrooms, response inhibition, sustained attention are big ones, right? I expected those to be clicked and, very large. Over 200 entries for every single one. That's where I was blown away, Laurie. Every single area of every single executive function, teachers are seeing challenges, like great challenges across the board. So now the next question is, it's not just sustaining attention, response, inhibition. It's like, it's all of them. So where do you start? And it goes back, Jesse, to what you said earlier, that if we don't acknowledge this and do something about it, you're not going to get to the content. You're not going to get there.
Yeah.
So how do we move to system level, Laurie? This is great discussion.
And something that I think we forget has so much power is the voice of our students. I was invited to a PA day at a school last year, and it was like, do your song and dance and get people on board. And I thought, sure, no problem. And I ended up teaming up with another person from our senior team who is quite open in talking about her own learning challenges, her ADHD, her LD. And I had all my slides lined up, and I used maybe 3 slides because what people bought into was the story. Was the actual person saying, when I was in grade 4, I was as tall as I am now, and I couldn't read, and I didn't want anybody to know. So I came to school ready to just cause lots of issues, so that no one would notice. And both of you have been at SAG before, and I'm just a person who visits whenever I can. But you see that in spades when you're there. You see the kids who are able to say, yeah, when people asked me to read before I came here and I knew I couldn't, I would do A, B, C, and D. And I had a kid say to me one day there, I said, so when you go back after this experience, are you going to do those same sorts of things? Because his was really around externalized behaviors. And he said to me, like, he looked at me and he was like, why would I? I don't need to. I can read now.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we get caught up in talking to grown-ups about kids and we forget to talk to kids. Or to people with lived experiences. And so I know, Laurie, like you've done some work around that recently with talking to kids in classrooms. We've partnered with Queens, and they did some interviewing of students with LDs. And so all the data we've pulled, they have said some fabulous things that confirm so many of the things that a group like this feels, but puts it in student words so that it is actually really hard to ignore when your students are telling you those things.
Thanks.
And Jesse, I think that when we're bringing it to system and working with teachers, it's not only that $1 million question for the teacher, it's going in for the students and asking them. The leadership teams that I work with found that if they were just focusing on their want, the BSP, they didn't go as deep. Children complied, but it was when the children had a vested interest in acknowledging that this was a hard challenge to normalize the challenge. That's a huge point. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think too, the follow-up, like this is where the coaching piece comes in. Like as the classroom teacher, you've done your BSP, you've been doing it for a while, you're setting your student up for success, your whole class, you're giving them the strategies. You go into the activity and you see students are either using strategies or they're not using strategies. And it's at this moment where coaching needs to take place. This is where our language as instructors change from maybe what we've used in the past. As opposed to trying to problem solve for our students, we direct them back to the strategies with phrases like, that's a great strategy you're using there. Can you tell me more about it? Or is there a particular strategy that you would like to use as you approach this problem? And it's that little, there are these little tweaks along the way. And I've shared this with you, Laurie, that when you've done the BSP, you're doing you're doing countless things that we're not talking about, but are vitally important to the success of whether this is going to get picked up to the kids. And like, these are the subtle nuances of teaching, right? And that's the beauty of going into someone else's classroom who's an expert in that area and watching them do it, because there's these small things that are not in the book. There are these small things that are not talked about when we get together like this that actually make or break the approach. And I've worked with teachers who they're fantastic and they've got their hand on everything, and their classroom runs like it's fantastic, and they have such a wonderful relationship with their students. And if you were to ask them, how do you build that relationship with them? Like, what have you done to have such a loving, caring environment? They would just, that's just who I am. That's what I do. But what is it? What's this? What are you doing every day? Because on the flip side of that are teachers who don't have that relationship in that environment in their classroom, and they're expecting to have executive functions and BSP solve the problem that a relationship hasn't been built.
Mm. Wouldn't it be interesting to have some kind of an annotated BSP, like a video with annotations about what's happening, or even just a series of pictures with like information from both teachers and children about what was being experienced at each step of the way and what was being delivered. So I want to pivot us now to each person kind of talking, nutshelling what you've been working on, what feels like it's worked, and what advice you have. And I think your advice has been coming through in every step of the discussion we've just had as well. But maybe Alana, would you start us off? You're at the top of my screen.
Sure thing. So just what we're doing, the work in the board. So for many of you, this is like 7 years in the making, Laurie, and I think that's time for sustainable change, and that to me is what's been important. We didn't want the work with executive functions to be a one and done, the flavor of the month, that this is something that will stay in the board, that it's not on Chris, Jesse, or Alana. It's not an us thing, because we move and go. And that distributive leadership is so important. So the approach that I've taken, like it initially started with meeting Laurie, doing that action research at Saganaska, and my own play in the classroom. But it really then has moved with being able to have such great support from system leadership, the ability to write a grant, the Removing Barriers grant, to have that fund, that support to actually put executive functions, increase school leader and educator capacity to address specific individual student needs, and specifically building that capacity of our educators, focusing on executive function skills and how to embed the barrier strategy protocol. That sentence is right in our multi-year strategic plan. So working with that, basically now what we've done this past year, we had a launch day with Laurie in October. And after we had the launch day, we invited our leadership teams, and I was blown away. My learning to anyone listening back to this is think bigger when you're asking for funds or money in that. I asked for the support. We have 14 schools involved. I had over 26 asked to be involved. So the need is out there. With the funds available, so we have those school teams involved with 2 educators and the administrator. That key administrator point, Laurie, is huge. Your administrator needs to be on that leadership team and coming to the meetings, because they're able to remove those barriers right in the moment, and that's been really impactful. So after we had the release time on that day, where basically school teams were able to plan for how they were going to input the executive function awareness and their barrier strategy, or what we're calling that power protocol, into their school communities. They were then given 4 days each per school. So not only were they able to come out to meet with Laurie for the day, which we were at a school, we were in a grade 9D stream classroom, Laurie modeled the barrier strategy, then they were given significant time to plan. Then they go back to their schools. They have 4 days to use however they like. That was really important, Laurie, that autonomy, because the next step is that midpoint check-in. When I did go around, which they were given more time to meet with me a half a day, and we did a barrier strategy with each of the teams on how it's going, real honest conversation, and what did we need to refresh to go to the next step. That was the key moment. Laurie and Jesse, you said it before, being able to build into your grant or your project to go back to help support. And that's the only time I've really been involved. Other than that, it's a school leadership team doing all the work, so that distributive leadership. And now we're at the point that they're now working and doing their work. And the goal was initially to do the power protocol or barrier strategy, to get every educator to do it 10 times. Some of the Laurie learning, Laurie, and we'll talk about this on the 30th at our consolidation day with you, is school teams went and felt that we're going to pick, teachers are going to do this once and then go back to it 10 times on that really meaningful topic. Because what they found with that barrier strategy, if they had so much great learning and teaching involved, they weren't going back to it enough. And Chris, you said it, to go back to the strategies and then get that feedback and coaching. So I did have some school teams say, you know what, it's not about the amount. We need to pivot that. It's about using it, and you have that barrier strategy, anchor chart, such good teaching. Now let's, really call responsibility of the student to use the strategy and then explicitly teach them if they need that. So we've had some pivots, but what this project gave schools some flexibility to meet the learners that were in front of them. All 5 high schools participated. In the high schools, they're doing it in what they call their learning sprints. Department heads, administration are modeling it, but they're going a little bit more focused approach. I am so excited to hear the learning strategies courses actually having some of the schools are doing a real deep focus on executive functions in there, as well as all the D-stream classrooms, and bringing that in with advocacy and learner portraits as well. So it's really what the school needs it for the students that are in front of them. So then we're going to come back together on the 30th, which we're going to meet at a different school site. This is going to be more primary, junior, intermediate focused rather than high school this time, to then share more learning and strategies with Laurie there for the day, modeling in the classroom. And then, and Jesse, this goes back to you. Often when we do PD, this is our consolidation, our end day. I don't even want to use that word for that day, Laurie, because it's like, this is a pause to reflect, idea borrow of all the great things that are happening, and then we're giving teams a significant chunk of time to think about what's next. And I already know some teams are so excited to talk about their school improvement, like they're excited about their school improvement plan for September, right? So they're gonna try and get a jump on it for next year. This is something that's going to continue and be sustainable for student achievement. And then going back to that student voice to capture, how is it making a difference in their life? So that's kind of the grant project that I've been working on this year at system level.
That's amazing, Alana. Thanks for sharing that.
No, thank you, Laurie, for all of your support. Couldn't do it without you. And all the educators. Oh my goodness, amazing.
It's incredible. Okay, who wants to go next?
Jesse, do you want to go?
Sure. So I've talked about a couple times the work that we're doing with our intensive support teachers and our student support teachers, and other boards. You call the student support teachers CERTs. And so our intensive support teachers are our new teachers that are in some of our schools that are working with kind of students who require tier 3 supports. And so really trying to set both of those groups of teachers up as leaders in their school, and as coaches in their school who can be working with classroom teachers to support the development of tier 1 services, in addition to providing some tier 2 and tier 3 services themselves. And so, like I said, we have equipped them with lots and lots of learning this year around EFs, and have sent them home from every meeting with something to read, something to explore, something to watch, so that they've got choices about how to share this back with their staff. And so as I'm in schools, I'm seeing posters on walls, I'm seeing activities happening, I'm hearing about games being played at staff meetings. And it's helping to answer the question of, so we had a book club, now what? What's our next step? And and so that has been effective. The other thing, as I said, that we're doing is really trying to embed it into our curriculum PD so that it is not just a spec ed initiative, but that it's coming from all areas of PD. And then something that we're working on right now that I'm super excited about is the idea of even within spec ed and the different initiatives that we have, like we are big fans of Shelley Moore and her inclusion work. We are big fans of UDL. We are really learning lots about the third path and David Tranter's work. We are doing lots of focusing on mental health. And we're conscious that all of those things have lots of overlap in our minds, but that they feel like distinct entities to teachers. And so it feels confusing and it feels like competing priorities because we're like, we need to be doing third path, safety and regulation first. We need to be knowing our learner and setting learning goals and success criteria so that we're doing the UDL piece of things. We need to be really focusing on that strength-based practice according to Shelley Moore, right? And so what we're trying to do is bring all of that together with our EF learning to say, here are sort of the common principles that all of those pieces bring together to create a bit of a foundation for really good tier one supportive students. And emotional validation is a huge part of that. Celebrating identity is a big part of that. And we're not sure what that's going to look like. We have teased out lots of, it might be this, it might be this, it might be this. But right now we're just really doing the work at our level of looking for those crossover pieces so that we can still be doing that learning with people, but not having them feel like any one of those super important things is the flavor of the month. That's going to quickly be replaced by a new flavor next month. We know these things are all really important and we don't intend to stray away from them, but how do we make it doable for the classroom teacher? So that's something that I'm really excited that we're working on. Um, and then we have just really awesome things going on. Like I have a friend who teaches grade 8 and she works closely with her SST and they do a big BSP at the beginning of grade 8 year to say, what are going to be some of the barriers about grade 9? What's going to be really tricky about high school? And then that BSP carries over the entire grade 8 year where they're finding strategies for all of those barriers with the hope that as students get closer and closer and closer to going to secondary school, they have strategies in place that are going to support them in feeling confident and successful when they get there. And because they have all year to do it, there is time for the student who says, because they explore, let's say, lots of different ways to organize your materials. We could have one binder with dividers. We could have 4 binders. But there's time for the kid who says, an accordion file. That's going to work for me. And there is time for him to try his accordion file and discover whether or not that is successful for him, and move on to something else if he needs to, because it is a longer term goal and doesn't need to be finished by the end of this 20-minute period or this day or this week. It's a bigger goal, which is exciting. And so I'm seeing more and more of that, which really makes me happy because that is teachers taking the learning that we've given them and really saying, what do my students need the spin on this to be? And then other teachers in their school seeing that work and getting excited as well.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Jesse. I want to move to Chris because I know he has to scoot off the call in about 7 minutes, and I think you'll have time. But nobody puts Chris in the corner, and I hate that you're feeling pressed for time.
Anytime there's a Dirty Dancing reference, I'm all in. So
Thank you, Jesse.
yeah, Jesse. So if I don't want to cut you off, Jesse. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no.
I think when I think of our journey at Hastings, we started to see real change when we started to get leadership buy-in centrally, when we started to have conversations at a central level and had support behind it. It wasn't just one person going out and having conversations. It's moved quickly now. We're at a point where it is part of our board's strategic plan. It's that language is there. It's fantastic. It's moving into being embedded into school success plans. And that comes from working directly with administrators at professional development days, or working with them one-on-one or in small groups. And asking the question when we get started is, what are some things at your school you want to work on? Because ultimately, no matter what they say, underpinning that are strong executive function skills. And that's how we get more buy-in, and that's how we get principals interested in it, because at the school level, we need leadership buy-in to impact change amongst the teachers. It won't happen if the administrator is not full on board. Teachers are not going to follow. There's no leadership there. So having the administrators on board is essential. I did take something away from this today because it's been in the back of my mind is that follow-up piece for us is something I need to work at and figure out how do we follow this up and support those teachers who are trying it. They have questions, and that coaching piece, how do we bridge that gap for them? And maybe that's going to be my work in the next few years, is to try to figure out how we can make that happen. There were some great suggestions in terms of funding. That'll be things that I'll look into and see if that's something that we can take next level. But if there was someone listening to this and you are out there and you're trying to bring executive functions to your system, there's a lot of obstacles that I faced, and there were days that I came home and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get this off the ground. I don't have any idea if this is, like, people are pushing back on it. I knew it worked. I've used it, right? And that's where I drew the confidence in the fact that if I can just get people to listen and try, it'll work. So yeah, that's it.
And Chris, I love that idea of also the collaboration. Like I'd be remiss about when you said about getting your leadership on board. 100%. My superintendent said, you made me a believer, and I see the impact. And Jesse, you said special education needs to transcend all of the different silos that sometimes can be a barrier at a board office system level, which I know we work very hard to have that collaboration. And I would be remiss, and if anyone's listening, a foot in as working with your curriculum with the Math Achievement Action Project, which I know every board has to do, and there can be funding in the special education, and so that our curriculum coordinators, Jesse, I think you'd agree, become special education teachers too. Like our curriculum support workers that are going out and doing the work see spec ed first now and do that EF, that learning readiness first before they get into the math curriculum to support with EQO and all of those other things. So Jesse, I really like that lens through whatever the work, literacy, math, whatever. And that is a huge, huge impact. So thank you. I'm going to take that.
I can't thank you all enough. I can't express enough respect for the years, almost decade, for most of you that you've put into this particular project. It's so inspiring. I think that we have all done a lot of work in the areas where we have control. I don't think we've gotten school right yet in general. I think there are some decisions being made like sort of above the levels that we're talking about that need more information from teachers and how teachers are experiencing classrooms. And I think maybe that's another big area of research is like, if we can solve every single problem that we know of right now, what other problems remain? One thing I'm sure of is that we can do amazing things, that in the next decade, we are going to achieve things that we can't even imagine right now. I am so confident in all of us as a team and each of you as individuals. And this just fills up my heart, and I'm so grateful to all of you. So thank you so much for your collegiality and your commitment. Thank you.
On that, Laurie, let us all take a moment to thank you, because you impacted each of us in a very special
Yes.
way. Without you, this work 7, 10 years would not be here. So when you hear everything that is happening, please take this moment and like soak it in. Your impact, John Hattie says, has been transformative. It has been impactful. All of us are at system level now, reaching hundreds, if not thousands of students that, because of the work, because of your passion that you bring to children and helping educators, you're amazing, and thank you. So,
Well, high five, everybody. High five to you. We'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll follow up
Yeah,
with
everybody.
you.